Welcome to another exciting episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. I have a very special guest today. She is a cultural system theorist and a consciousness researcher known for her pioneering work at the intersection of quantum physics, human development, and systems information. She's also the founder and architect of the Quantum Reconciliation Project, as well as known as the creator of the lucid Haligan theory. Please welcome in the one, the only Elizabeth Haligan. Elizabeth, it is such an honor to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for your time.
Definitely. Elizabeth, do you want to tell me a little more about yourself? I know especially that you're ADHD, and in case anybody doesn't know what that means, it means that basically she's autistic and ADHD, but Elizabeth isn't letting that stop her, as you could just tell as that intro was. She is killing it out there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I feel like maybe I've found my stride now, but it doesn't necessarily fit in with the paradigms that define our shared reality at the levels of systems and power, and that's where most people find it to be challenging. But yeah, I have a little bit of a strange background, I guess you could say, in that I was born into the religious group known as Jehovah's Witnesses, and
Okay.
learned a lot about the world and about spirituality from that context. I don't believe in binaries. I don't believe that reality is black and white. It's not gray. It's technicolor, and so I had a lot of really important formative experiences in that context, but there were also a lot of experiences in that context that were harmful and that kept me from being myself and understanding myself. And so as I started to see inconsistencies in that context, I began to exit from it. But it's a group that practices a very austere or severe form of shunning. So you can't really leave, and you don't know that until you try. So,
Right. And the things
when
I've
you
heard
try,
about
you
it, though,
get.
is like
Yeah,
if you leave, you can't talk to your family. Outside
right,
ideas aren't okay because obviously you're diverting away from what they want you to think,
right.
and things like that too. So, when did you leave though? And was it hard though? Because once you found out the reality is that you're not going to be able to keep in contact with anyone that still associates with them.
Yeah, it was very hard. I never actually formally resigned. If you do that, they consider you to be like what's called an apostate. I don't know if people have seen The Mandalorian, but basically, like you're worse than a heretic. You are a subverter and a rebel, and it's not really like that. But if you do, like, let's say you just leave, but you don't formally resign, you just kind of fade away. People in the former members community call that fading out. Then, your family might still talk to you, but you're still labeled as a pariah. But there's a bit of a loophole there. And so that's what I did. I never formally resigned. But if you come out and talk about your personal story like I'm doing now, then you can be slated into that apostate category just for talking about your own life story, like, which is why it took me so long to speak about
Yeah.
it. But it was actually fairly recent that I left. I would say that I started kind of questioning certain things. I've always been a very kind of introspective, deep thinker, but I started really questioning things around, I would say, like the mid 2010s, or certain things. The more I kind of rose in the ranks, for less of a better phrase, the more inconsistencies I saw. And then when COVID hit, there were even just more inconsistencies in terms of like how people were treated and prioritizing policy that was harmful, even if unintentionally, over taking care of people. And that's really when I just got to the point where I couldn't justify it anymore. And so I would say I formally left. I moved across the country. I was in an abusive relationship, moved across the country, changed my phone number, moved by myself. And then I ended up like really coming to terms with like, oh my God, this is a story that I was told. And it's okay now to admit that it wasn't true. I would say that didn't really happen until 2021, 2022. It took me, it was a process. It wasn't one single moment. And that's really hard when your entire framework for making sense of reality falls apart. That's not just a psychological process, it's a physical process, because your reality as you experience it is a neural map inside your brain. And in order to change your reality, you have to change the wiring of your brain, which then affects your body. So deconstructing from a religious context or any kind of context that is harmful or very restrictive or traumatizing is an embodied process that requires rewiring the nervous system. And so it was a very long, painful, and tearful journey to get here, but I wouldn't
But you've
change
done
it.
impressive things. I mean, to
Thank
where
you.
you've come from to where you're at now, like I mean, just in that intro alone, quantum physics is such a high level of things for a lot of people. A lot of people don't even understand even what that is, you know. And for you to
Yeah.
go from where you're at now to what you're doing now is just amazing. I mean, it really is. It's something to
Thank
be
you.
of inspiring because, like you said, it took all those years to reprogram from what you've been taught all your life, you know, and it's hard. It really is. It
Hmm.
had to be hard. It couldn't be easy in any way possible, you know, and you know, I'm sure it got interesting when you start to realize how many things that didn't make sense that you're like, okay, well now this starts making sense to me. Why it didn't line up exactly.
Right. Exactly. And I think, what you're saying is a good point. I mean, there are a lot of people who look at my writing and engagement in the space of quantum physics and treat it as quackery. Um, but this goes into like being autistic and ADHD. I fundamentally believe that autism, ADHD, other neurological patterns that don't align with um, what is typical are just iterations of evolution. And people hear me say that and they're like, I'm not a superhuman. Like, my disability is not, some superhero X-Men Marvel Studios like blessing. And it's because people mistakenly equate the word evolution with progress. But what I'm saying is that evolution is just an iterative process in which nature will iteratively create mutations or varieties of patterns in order to improve. That depending on the conditions upon which we find ourselves in, that nature will find ways to survive by rewiring itself, and it does that
Yeah.
in the brain. So,
It would be almost
yeah.
adaptive though, when it technically that they're
Yes,
adapting to survive basically in the same
it's
theory.
adapting to survive. Exactly. So, like, I think one of the evidences of this that makes it so plain, and I talked to your friend Nick about this the other day, that black autism is so much more underdiagnosed in Black women. I am a biracial Black woman and didn't realize that I was autistic and ADHD until much later in life. And then when I finally understood that, how much more sense my life made, and explained like why I was always so miserable and felt like I was seeing things nobody else saw in every context that I was in. And it makes sense to me that like it would be underdiagnosed in Black women because Black women, given like intersectionality, have so many different conflicting social maps that they have to navigate that they're more adept at masking and switching between them, but that results in, more stress, more trauma. And then it makes sense to me why the brain, looking at like autistic brains, why the brain is not, pruning neural synapses the way it does in maybe a neurotypical brain who's faced less trauma, because the brain is adapting to survive by keeping that full neural jungle intact. And
Yeah.
so just, yeah, to loop that back to like my interest in quantum physics, given that like I was born in a cult context and I took that as absolute truth, I would have died for those beliefs. That's how absolutely true at one time I believed them, because
Well,
I
because
believed
they
that that
make it
was a,
so really like, you know, if you
yeah.
start at a young age, you can pre-program somebody or you can get them to believe it because that's all you've been taught your whole life. It's like, of course you're going to
Mm-hmm.
die for it because you believe so strongly in these things. If you think about it, like you could apply it to politics too. People that are very
Yes.
political, what if, are their parents very political? Is it where they got the influence of, you know? And a lot of times we're the reflection of our parents because they're the ones that are instilling these beliefs on us in the beginning, you know, and a lot of these other
Mm-hmm.
relationships, like even to think about even abusive relationships, if you break it down, what was
Yeah.
their parents' relationship like? Was dad very abusive to mom there? Or was it mom that was abusive to dad? Somebody in that relationship was doing something, or grandma, grandpa, you know, you could even go that far with grandma, grandpa, you know, abusing them too in some way because, you know, there's some
Mm-hmm.
people who've had on the show, they were telling their stories about things that, you know, the one was with Tiff Carson, me and her were talking, and it was so hard to listen to it because she's talking about how her brother had daddled addiction, and then the grandfather and the father were abusing him. So, you know, it was generational. So grandpa
Mm-hmm.
was hitting him, dad was hitting him, and then he's dealing with all these other things on top of it. So, when you really think about it, it makes sense though. I mean, you're not speaking crazy when you come to that sense, because you're saying just what you were told to believe. It's like, it's the same thing with anything.
Exactly.
It's like, everybody's getting riled up because everyone starts believing it, and then they have this like sheep-like mentality because, I feel like some people in that sense like to just follow the lead. You're just like, some people are just
Hmm.
not sure what to do, so they just got to go with the crowd. They want to fit in, and
Yeah.
it's just like, it is what it is. You know what I mean? When it comes to that kind of thing, it's just how it is. And you can see it though, because a lot of people get riled up, and that's why certain people are so good at being leaders, because they know how to
Hmm.
grab at those certain points. Think of like Charlie Manson,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think the guy from Waco. My dad and I were talking about it the other day with the religious cult guy in the Waco area, where he had the whole
Yeah.
compound thing. Just the idea of the fact that he had such that reach that he could convince you. And with Charlie Manson was like, he was convincing these people to commit these heinous acts, but he wasn't doing it himself. He was so influential,
Yeah.
and it's just if you're good at if you're good at influencing people, it's the same thing with politics and all these other things, and it's just like that's how people get elected and all these other things. It's just like they know the right words to say to people to get them to believe
Hmm.
what they're saying.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a combination of the things you just said. So on the one hand, all of us are born into a context that begins wiring our neural map before we have a choice into what that map is going to look like, right? Like the brain has to have some type of initial scaffolding to start building a map of self, and we don't get to decide what that map looks like. It's something that is programmed into us from birth between like our parents and society. um and then you know you as you get older, you start to like question that, especially if you're autistic person,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
because again, you're like retain is if you're coming from a context of like high trauma, a lot of complexity, then you do retain that whole neural jungle because the brain has epigenetically, the body and the brain have epigenetically learned from the parents that you're coming into a chaotic environment, and so you need this to survive. So it's like some of my work talks about that, how evolution is I adamantly believe that the current theory of evolution is absolutely incomplete, and that
hmm
evolution is a feedback loop between genes, epigenetics, and conscious awareness. That, how we choose to respond to the things that we experience affect our epigenetic, switchboard, and that affects genes, and then we pass that on. That's not woo, that is established. It's just not been synthesized into an evolutionary theory. And so that's what I've been starting to do.
Elizabeth, I have to say
Yeah.
though, when you talk about these things, you make it so easy to understand. I love it. I absolutely do. I love that
Thank
when I
you.
meet people that are so brilliant, but they can break it down for everybody to understand the way I'm not even lost in this conversation. I'm even more interested than before, because, I love how you break it down to it makes sense to everybody. And that's great. And I love how you're making the little notes about autism. I think people don't really understand what all that stuff is, and how autistic people think on a different level than most people do. And I work with somebody who's autistic, so it's a little different when you approach these people. You can't approach them from the same angle, and I had to keep telling them, you can't tell him the same things that you tell everybody else, because he doesn't get it. Ask him how to best apply it to him, and I think that was people's biggest
Yeah.
thing. It's like, they're like, well, he doesn't listen. Well, maybe you're not approaching it right. Did you ask him how he understands things? Like, listen, hey, can I pull you aside and
Yeah.
ask you a question? How is it best to get this information to you? What do you think is the best way to go about it? For people that don't get it, and it's funny when I hear them all say things and I just start laughing at them. I'm like, y'all just make me laugh, because you don't know anything, do you? Ever since doing this podcast, I have a better understanding of mental health and all
Yeah.
these different conditions, and it's like I see things on a different level than everybody else does, but everybody comes to me in a different light now. They're like, listen, I know what you do, so let me ask you a question. This is for you, is what they always say. Well, hey, listen, this is something you don't understand. Let me ask you something. And they start asking me something related. I just start laughing. I'm like, really? I'm like, this is great. I love it though. I love though that that you're not allowing it to limit you, because you feel like a lot of people, when they get diagnosis, they like to take and run with it and go, well, I'm depressed, so I can't do nothing. I mean, it's like, but given there are situations where it's so bad where people can't function, normally. But I get that. But I'm not saying those people. I'm saying these people that just like to take it and run, or people like to take the different awareness months too is another thing that really irritates me when you're watching these people's videos with Suicide Awareness Month, and then you see all these people pop up, but then if you watch their content feed, it just completely goes away. It's like, okay, well the hot button issue's over for the month. Let's go on to something else. But all of us
Yeah.
still deal with these issues afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a lot of that. I worked in corporate DEI for a while and I stopped because first of all, like autism and its need for too much truth telling doesn't go very well with corporate America at all. So like I think most people
Right.
can relate to that. And I don't think that's just inherent to autism. I think that that is just part
I
of the
think it's in
evolutionary
general, honestly.
spectrum. Yeah, of like there are just a lot of us, like especially like millennials, Gen Zers, who are like, if this doesn't make sense, I'm not going to do it, and it
Yeah,
doesn't make
exactly.
sense. Kind of, that's just the evolutionary direction of humankind, and autism just happens to be like a lot less masked version of it. Like, I
Well,
don't
you
have
see a
time
lot
for
more
this.
people coming out that are on the spectrum too. You know, a lot of people
Yes.
you start realizing that they fall on there as well. So it's really not surprising when you said, "Oh, I haven't wasn't diagnosed till later on," because
Yeah.
that's what's happening to a lot of people these days. A lot of people just don't know because a lot of people are scared to go find out because they're like, "Well, what if I find out I'm different than somebody else?" Is almost the thought I'm thinking they're having is, "Well, I'm different than everybody else," and I tell somebody they're going to treat me differently. They may not. Welcome to society. What it is now, like you can't share your mental health stories a lot of times with people or your stories of being autistic because you don't know what these people are going to say on the internet, you know. And a lot of people see those negative comments, you know. Like I like to quote Bert Kreischer, the comedian, all the time because he always says like what he had an interesting conversation one time. Okay, so he said that he could get 1,000 positive messages, but that one negativity he's staring at only. He ain't worried about everybody else. And this is a guy that can make jokes about anything. You know, comics are always those type of people that make jokes about each other. They're always
Yeah.
really special, I feel, because he's not afraid to talk about these things, especially being a male too, because you know we males don't like to talk about our stuff
That's
because we're
true.
being pre-programmed not to say shit to anybody because it's like it's not very masculine to talk about your feelings.
Exactly. I know. That's so sad. My husband is a uh essay survivor, childhood essay survivor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has primarily worked in he has a master's degree in exercise physiology, but then like double majored in sociology and psychology, and that's a lot of what we work on together and talk about is like how to help men become
Oh,
more
okay. So you guys
comfortable.
work together. Okay, I
Yeah, how to
love it.
talk.
So
Yeah, yeah.
can we explore that a little bit? I'd like to know what kind of
Yeah.
work you guys are doing together. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, it's still very foundational, but like a lot of the stuff that I write about, are things that he and I have talked through. I am more kind of the I would say traditionalist in terms of like wanting to document it all from a neuroscience and evolutionary standpoint. My husband wrote a book. He started writing it when we met. And he spent most of his career in sports. Was an elite college athlete. Ended up having like some offers from different MLB teams, Major League Baseball teams, to work as strength and conditioning
Okay.
coach. But he didn't take those routes because he had a couple of kids and it was really rocky with his ex-wife and he wanted to be present for them,
Oh my
didn't
God,
want to be
MLB hits my
gone.
heart hole close. Oh, I'm a
Right?
huge
Yeah.
baseball fan.
Yeah, he is too. And actually like his he didn't pursue like an incredible baseball player, but he didn't pursue it because the essay he experienced happened like in the context of his little league team. And it's like I
Oh,
think he
okay.
would have been like the next Babe Ruth if he had actually played because he's scary good. Like when we just go, play at the the park or something, like he's incredibly good at it and like feels the grief of like if I had been brave enough to speak about that, I could have, done more
Yeah.
about it earlier. But it wasn't until he was 28 um he had like ended up with some type of citation, I forget exactly what, because he had he had a little bit of alcohol and drove, and then no, sorry, I hear like a noise. It's distracting me. But he had a little bit of, hold on, let me see if I can fix this really quickly. Huh, okay. Anyway, ended up in therapy basically for whatever this citation was. And that was the first time he was 28, and then he opened up about his experience and started to like share with his family, and realizing this is what held him back from baseball, and it had a lot to do with like certain things in his life and why they had gone a certain way. So by the time we met, it was about 10 years later. And I was coming off of, just leaving the Jehovah's Witness context, an abusive relationship. He was in the middle of a custody battle to get his kids because even though they had shared custody, it got even worse. And so he talked about how he had always had this creative side, but even, his family was so focused on sports that they didn't really, like, see that side of him and make space for it. And, I'm like, yeah, if you wanna write, then, like, write, do that, explore that side of yourself. And, he was talking about what he should write, and I was like, the best, like, works of art come from writing or doing what you personally have lived. And I was like, so take your own life and turn it into a fantasy novel, because he loved, like, Lord of the Rings and
Hmm.
Game of Thrones and stuff like that. And so he wrote a novel, which it ended up being so long that we had to split it into 4 books. So,
Oh, it's good though. I mean, a series.
yeah,
A
it was
lot of people
good.
like those kind of series. Think like Harry Potter, Lords of the
Yeah.
Rings. Any of those books that you think of that broke it down into several different parts, that's
Yes.
great though. I mean, he got to do something creative that he's always wanted to do. And
Yes.
it's funny when you say that he's the typical, like, most of these movies, these chick flicks, the guy has something else he wants to do other than sports kind of thing. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of the one reference I'm thinking of, but if it comes to me, I'll think about it. But
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, that's so cool
Yes.
though. I mean, you inspired him to do it, and does he talk much about his experience and what happened to him at all? I mean, he could probably help other people just by relating
Yeah.
with them, like, things like that. Just like, hey, listen, I've been there. I know where you're at. And I know when it comes to a lot of those things, a lot of those people tend to get a little cautious because they're like, well, I don't
Mhm.
want to talk to you about it because you're not sure that they're going to understand what they're about to tell you and how to react, with any subjects, honestly. A lot of
Yeah.
them, like suicide, sexual assault, all those, even attempt survivors, people tend to alienate them because they're like, well, and it had to be hard for a relationship for both of you guys because both of you
Yes.
guys are both out of abusive relationships.
Yes.
So I'm sure it was very interesting at first for you guys how you interacted because it's like you both are just kind of wondering when is it going to start. Probably, am I not on the right
Yes.
lines of that?
You're absolutely right. It was like a trauma dance is what I call it at the beginning. We're both dancing around each other's trauma. I think, that's what our work is focused on, right? Like, I was working in corporate America until November 2024. The moment I have to back up. It's not the way I talk sounds circular, but it all makes sense in my head, and I'm gonna
No,
connect
you're
it all
good.
here.
You're
But,
making
like,
perfect sense over here to me. So
okay. I am 100% certain there is going to be a market crash soon. Like, all of the elements are there. I'm sitting here watching it. It's part of why I started doing this work, because, I lost my job with the company I was working for. And I was going to say, as soon as the market does crash and all of these NDAs become relevant, then irrelevant, I'm going to really start talking about what happened to me in all these different work spaces. But until then, I can't. But every single job I've ever had, I have been an extremely high performer and also extremely problematic, because my success comes from working outside of the conventions and showing why the conventions are part of the problem that keep people from being successful. And that, like, no manager wants an employee that's capable of that, because it shows them where they need to change and they need to improve. And then you're targeted as a problem because the ego is rigid in most human beings and just wants to maintain itself rather than evolve. This is,
yeah.
I believe, the evolutionary bottleneck of humanity. That fear and ego outweigh sense and coherence, and so we stay
I think that
trapped.
applies to a lot of things, though. You think
Mhm.
about it.
Uh-huh.
Instead of mentoring people these days, it's like we have to shut people down for no
Yeah.
reason. It's like why not teach them the skills you have? But that's my take. I like to teach everybody. Like even in podcasting, like with new people I meet, I always give them a rundown of the experiences I've had. I'm always willing to
Yeah.
show them something like, hey, listen, let me show you some stuff I know. This is what I know. Let me get you started. At least you have any questions. I have all the resources. It's the same thing where I work, where I do now. Like I work in customer service, and anybody new that comes in, everybody's all like, oh God, oh God. I'm like, no. I'm like, come on, let's go. I'll go show you some things. Let's go. Because that's just how I am. I'm always that type of person that likes to make people feel, included. And and I found that out when I interviewed a psychologist named Dr. Tim Blake. He'll be back on the show, but he was one of my early interviews before I started doing video interviews. Him and I were talking, and he was just asking me questions of things. He said, "Listen, let me ask you a question." He goes, were you abandoned as a kid?" And I was like, "Are you in this fucking room with me, dude? Are you reading my mind?" Because it was so weird. Because he's like, based on what you're saying and what you're doing, he said that's what happens to people that are abandoned at some point in their life is
Mhm.
that they tend to make people don't want people to feel left out or something like that, and he said it's not a bad thing. It's just I'm just asking because I'm curious, and I found it so interesting that just by me telling my story. He's like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. It's what he commented too. I was like, okay, Tim, calm down. You're flexing a little too much here, man. But it was so interesting how he said that to me because I was like, yeah, that's just me. But that's how he always been. Like, I
Yeah.
don't mind teaching things to new people and things like that. Any young men I run into, I'll teach them some stuff, talk to them about things. I'm always willing to listen. And that's what's so great about the podcast is that since starting this podcast, it's been an evolutionary thing of Pete, though, too. I started self-discovering of myself. As you watch these
Yeah.
episodes continue, it changes because I did 200 in the first year. And that's a lot for a
That is
podcaster. A
a
lot of people.
lot.
I was an overachiever, okay? Listen, let's be honest. I was an overachiever. I'm sorry. Arch alone, I did 35 straight interviews, and I was doing them every single day of the week, but it was just because I enjoyed the conversation of getting into it with people. And, it was so fascinating. These people just kept coming on the show, and people kept responding. Hey, listen, I want to be on your show. Hey, I want to be. And the demand was so big. Like, in the beginning, this thing was booked till the end of the year. And I did this 2024 is when I first started this thing. So I started in September when I joined a podcasting network originally. It was something new. I was like, okay, cool. Hey, listen, you're going to pay for the program for me? All right, cool. Why not? Let's do this. And I took full advantage of them. Like, they took full advantage of me, but I took full advantage of them because I was like, let's hammer out some episodes. And then when I got to the beginning of the year, I opened my calendar up, and that's when I started doing more. But the
Yeah.
situations kept getting more interesting. We had somebody on the show literally tell us that he had thought about killing himself that morning. And I was
Wow.
like, oh, God, what is going on? And this is the first time I've had to deal with that situation, but I played it
Yeah.
completely cool. I stayed mellow. And we've had people. We've had a person on the show that was actually sexually assaulted by the grandfather, but that whole situation turned out kind of weird. Because then she tried to start telling people that I was weird. I'm like, I'm interviewing you. What do you mean? I'm asking you questions. And I told you right before we started that if something in there you didn't like or didn't want to
Mhm.
be asked, just let me know. Say, hey, listen, I'd rather not talk about it. Boom, we'll shift instantly away from it. Like, I am
Yeah.
very respectful when it comes to those, especially when it comes to that topic because, it's such a sensitive subject. But she was just kept giving me the answers and things like that. And I was just kind of like talking with her. And she's like, well, I didn't like how he was just digging deep. Well, I'm trying to get, as much
Mm.
information about it as I can for people. So like, hey,
Yeah.
listen, what was the situation? You know what I mean? I was doing my journalistic work I should do, when I'm doing this thing, because I want to make sure this is authentic as possible. Because when you're in this space, authenticity is the major big red flag here. Because if you're not authentic, people are going to read through your bullshit really quick, And I'm a very open person. At the same time, I'm very respectful. This whole area we're in is a safe space. People can come here and tell me the craziest things possible, and you'll hear nothing but compassion come from my side of the screen because it's like you're here telling your story, and I know how hard it is to tell these stories, and some of them. Woo, man, recently this season, we had a girl tell us that she had the Homeland Security. And I've known this girl for a little while. She told me she had Homeland Security kicking in her door, Elizabeth. I was like, what in the hell is going on in this conversation? I'm like, it's like Breaking Bad looks like a children's show compared to this girl's story. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, this is crazy. So,
Yeah.
but, I like I said, your resume, though, is amazing, though, for somebody that like, I mean, I think what you're doing is great. Honestly, I got to say, I'm so excited that I got a chance to even meet you because, like I said, Nick connected us, and then now you're here, and it's just like it's so cool. Do you have anything new you're planning and working on, or is there anything in the works that you haven't told anybody about? You want to say? This won't air till 2026, just so you know. So if it makes you feel any better, because that's how far out pre-recorded I am.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on that success.
Thank you so much.
Let me tell you exactly how like the work I'm doing started, what my intention
Okay,
was, and what I
definitely.
hope. Because in 2026, when this airs, it'll be even more relevant and prescient. It'll seem like, I think, like looking in a crystal ball, even though I don't think it's that. There's nothing mystical about it. So I
You can
was
make it
working.
sound mystical.
I could, and I want to tie it back to what you just said about like your own,
Yeah, definitely.
your own abandonment, because your experience of being abandoned and your response to it, I believe, is an example of the evolutionary bottleneck of humanity and how you're transcending that. So like it ties in so well with everything that I'm writing about and talking about. But I got out of I wasn't allowed to like pursue education in the Jehovah's Witness context because they're very anti-education for obvious reasons. Because if you start really engaging in deep critical thinking, you're going to start questioning the beliefs, and then you realize that they don't make sense. They're
Okay.
anti-education. I quietly went back to school as an adult when I was still in the context, like 100% believing it, because I was like, nobody's turning me down for a promotion just because I don't have a piece of paper because I'm too smart for that. I was like, it happened to me. It was very painful and it was unfair. And so I was like, I'm just going to make sure this is not something people can use against me. So I went back to school for a bunch of different stuff and it was kind of all over the place. One of my degrees, though, is in translation and interpreting. And plain language adaptation is something that I specialize in, which is why I do try to make things accessible. But I worked in healthcare most of my life, healthcare interpreting, then I did healthcare consulting and admin and blah, blah, blah. Then I was working for a health insurance company in November 2024. Oh my God, worst experience of my life. Like you cannot get to being in the C-suite position of a health insurance company without like having a black spot on your heart. And I will go on record saying that. Like, I'm not saying that those human beings are evil. I'm saying they have a lot of work to do in terms of their humanity. Like, and I don't know how those people sleep at night because it was the most miserable experience I've ever had. So anyway, I got let go, not because I wasn't performing, but like just because I was too troublesome. Like, I know I'm not going to write propaganda for you. You just need to do the work. Anyway, so after that experience, I just was like, I don't know what to do. It was hard to find a job. I don't think I can do corporate America anymore because it's all BS and I can't be myself. They don't actually want to make a difference. But I left the Jehovah's Witness context, like really wanting to make a difference in the world and make it better and try to help heal it. And nobody wants to heal anything. They just want to make profit. And the need to make profit over taking care of humans is why the world's a mess in the first place. So my husband was like, look, I trust you. Like, he wrote this book and it's about his own experience with trauma, but it's turned into a fantasy novel. But he centered like a woman as the main character because he has daughters and wanted them to like see that like story of resilience progress from the standpoint of a woman. And he was like, work on the book, market the book. And as I was working on this and then I'm looking at what's happening in society, and I was like, it feels a lot like we're on an extinction trajectory right now. And I'm wondering like what I can do to help shift that because I'm part of it. Like I'm part of the pattern. And I really believe that this is what autism, ADHD, like all these different disorders, they are pattern mappers. And I think that matters because pattern trumps data. Data, is reactive. So, we gather math, we gather statistics, and then we look at the statistics, but that is late. That is reactive. Pattern is emergent and it is proactive. So you see pattern first and you can translate into math later. And I do think that is an evolutionary edge. And we're at a bifurcation point. Either we integrate, we come together, we see the extinction loop and we try to get off of it, or, we stay on it and then that outcome is obvious. And people like you are at the hinge of that bifurcation point because I really believe that human evolution, I said it's a feedback loop, right, between genetics, epigenetics, and consciousness. And you're the perfect example of that, okay? So if you're coming from a history of tragedy, like most of us do, of trauma, most of us are inheriting baggage, significant baggage from our parents that they didn't integrate. Especially true in my case, true in my husband's case. And so you have like an evolutionary fork where you have a whole swath of humanity that's experiencing trauma and choosing not to repeat it, but to try to heal it in other people. And then you have a whole swath of humanity that's experiencing trauma and perpetuating it through violence, through oppression. You experience abandonment as a child. And I hear, your experience with a psychologist, pegging that in you and seeing that. And he's also picking up on the fact that not only were you abandoned, but because that has been so painful for you, when you interact with other people, you've made it your mission, whether consciously or subconsciously, to make sure nobody else feels that way. That's trauma integration. That's evolution. That's healing humanity because you experience something harmful and you're doing everything you can in your interactions with other human beings to heal that fracture in humanity by the way you behave. And then you have other people who experience that type of emotional neglect or violence, and then they perpetuate it. They don't integrate it. They don't heal from it, and they compound that in humanity. And so the evolutionary thesis that I wrote talks about that and what that actually looks like in the map of the brain. And so right now, what I'm just trying to do is educate people about that, because I believe that just having awareness of the fact that that is how human evolution works, and that our choice as to whether we heal or perpetuate these patterns of trauma and oppression makes a difference in our species survival is critical, is the message that I'm trying to share with people. So I'm hoping by the time this airs in 2026, we'll be in a place of more awareness about this. It's my dream one day to have, a center focused on correlating trauma integration and the spectrum of consciousness, including, neurodivergence, and really mapping what that looks like in the brain. Because I think if we really took time and did some fMRIs and correlated different disorders with different integration patterns in the brain, we would see some pretty clear consistencies in terms of what the human brain looks like with certain behaviors. But there's this artificial divide between neurology and psychology that keeps us from being able to really get at what drives human evolution. And I do believe that the brain is the primary driver of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, do you want to give me your thoughts on social media too? You can just keep talking and I'll just keep listening, honestly.
Oh my God. Social media. I talk about this. And so I have this article in Medium called Collapse Wasn't Inevitable. We locked ourselves out of evolution. And I talk about how fear spreads quicker than anything else. And social media is a primary example of that. And
yes, you're 100% correct on that one.
yeah. Yeah,
it is such an easy thing to think about it now. Like when we were kids, AOL was the big thing. Okay, so like AOL evolved into MSN. MSN evolved into what is now MySpace. When MySpace came up, and then MySpace originally was just a college campus message board for people to connect in college, and then it became a big space for everybody else, and then we had their own MySpaces, and then MySpace evolved into Facebook, and then Facebook went to and then we just kept going multiplying, and now you have so many different ways to spread. Cool. I'm on YouTube as well. Like I'm trying to think of that. Where can I cover? And everybody's like, oh, you're everywhere. I'm like, yeah, think about it though. You're going to get somebody everywhere. And then it comes to what was it? Somebody told me my numbers are low. I'm like, well, but you got to think like I'm spread out so much. I'm grabbing the people I get. These people that are watching, okay, this is how they prefer to consume their podcasts. Whether it be video, audio, if they're on the go. Like, and everybody's like, well, when I first started doing it, I started learning that with people. We were like, well, like I'm like Spotify. I'm on Spotify. Well, like I prefer Apple Music. I'm on Apple Music. Like everything they had an excuse for. I'm like, I'm on all these things. I hate to bring news to you, but I'm everywhere. Apple, Amazon. I'm on all the big. What you're doing, you want people listening. You're really a numbers person. Then why limit yourself to where you're being heard at? How about get yourself everywhere, and then whatever area takes off the most for you. Obviously, that's where your market is. In that kind of thing. And to me, it's like when people say the numbers, I'm like. Okay, but what's your point, though? I'm spread out so much. What numbers are we discussing here? Because the only ones really you can look at analytically is you can look at, YouTube. And, YouTube's page, like I get like, God, I don't even remember how many I looked at, like over 10,000 views or something. And
awesome.
Listen, I'm happy like one person watches it, honestly. I don't really care, like I look at the numbers, but like, I'm still early on in this thing, and me and Paul Bauer were talking about that. He was like, he told me to always be consistent when I do something. He said, when you're going to do this, he said, make sure consistency is a key. So that's why I went from doing live episodes to pre-recording, because that way I can bulk record a lot of these things, have it set out so far. That way, if I'm having a rough day and I don't get to the interviews, I'm not really limiting myself. I still have something consistently dropping. In like I'm booking out into February. So, honestly, I leave my rest of my week open to grab special interviews like this when I see people like other people are highlighting, hey, you got to go check out this person. Like in Nick's case, Nick started talking about it. Nick and I have had great conversations. I'm like, all right, Nick's got into something. Let's check out this person. And that's how we met, and other people are like, well, how am I on the show before, anybody else? Well, it just happened to be that you fall into my feed. I liked what I seen, and listen, hey, I can open a spot for you for this. It's not disrespectful to anybody else. It's just I just grab them as I go, and I try to be respectful of everybody's, everybody with books, but, it's like I just have time to open the schedule now that I bulk record it, that I can do even for special guests like yourself to come on, like different people, interesting stories I find, because I go to all these different places. I don't limit to where I get my guests from, because like my website will take you to Podmatch, which is normally where I find a lot of guests, but I like to look through the internet and see other things, so I'm through Podmatch, I'm through Instagram, Facebook, and Facebook, don't get me wrong, Facebook, you find some really great people on there. Like I met a 2-time international bestseller on there. She's going to come on for the record third time. She's going to be the first 3-time appearance person on the show. I met her through Facebook. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't limit, and I tell other people, I'm like, listen, Podmatch is great. Alex and what they're doing is awesome. I use that as a revenue source to cover the cost to run this podcast, and it's not that much. It really doesn't cost me much. I'm building a school community where I'm taking back the internet, as I like to say,
Yes,
because
there you go.
I don't like the politics. I don't like all this other nonsense and things like that. You know, it's like the old school message boards, but you can offer classes where you can teach people things, you know, and just take away all the drama that it's social media, because I feel like that's the
Yes.
problem.
Yeah.
Is there's too many people out there giving out false information. I invite the different experts and different people in their respective spaces to come in, you know, and if anybody has any input, I'm like, listen, give me some input. What do you think? You want to have a feed of your own to just post some stuff that you're doing, your work you're doing? Hey, cool. Let me know. I'll let you take a space, and you know what I mean? It's so cool. There's so many different opportunities, you know, and I know a lot. I've seen a post the other day where they said they think that school is going to basically take over social media. You know, like everybody's going to leave social media to go to these little communities because they're going to find their own area where they feel most comfortable in. They're not being judged, because I feel like with social media, that's the problem. Everybody's too judgmental, you know.
Yeah.
And I like to reference a video I watched of a 16-year-old girl who's talking about, oh, I'm getting ready for homecoming. Like, hey, awesome, Rod. You go to the comment section, and it's the most disgusting fucking things you've ever read in your life. This
Yeah.
grown-ass man telling this thing, oh, well, oh, your dress look good on the floor. And that's the
Yeah.
reason why I started my community. It's called the You Matter Society, because I want people to know that you matter. Your story matters. I just want to give you the safe space to come talk about it. So if you want to come in
Yeah.
and share, you're having a rough day, you want to share a story. And I have different feeds set up now, like one set up for addiction for a couple friends of mine. Jasmine and Jay both run podcasts that are, you know, about addiction. Jasmine's is actually based in Canada, called Everybody's Addicted. Jay's Rock and Recovery. You know, and then I invite authors. You know, hey, if you're writing books, put your books in here. Different podcast guests I run into, I leave it there for people to see, you know, and things like that too. But I'm always making it consistent. You know, notice consistency comes back up, everybody. You have to be
Yeah.
consistent. I'm consistently posting something every single day there. You know, it'd be a positive message of sort, you know, and I use like ChatGPT to look up some great, you know, mental health quotes and things like that too, or just different quotes I can find along the way. Just things just keep going, just being consistent, you know. But to me, it's just like, I think the internet's broken, and I think that we need to start taking it back, because they're not going to police it. So then we need to police it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to start
Yeah.
taking responsibility for things we're doing.
I love that. And here's why, because it aligns so well with what I've written in my theory. And it is that, like, the evolutionary bottleneck of humanity is the amygdala, which is like the fear center of the brain, you know, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And when the body is in amygdala hijack, the fear center of the brain literally overrides the reasoning center of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. And the internet currently is designed to keep people in amygdala hijack, where the prefrontal cortex is not online, it's not reasoning, it's not questioning, it's not investigating, it's just reacting. And that's how, you know, people stay in control, you know, or under the control of the powers that be, is that they're locked into amygdala hijack. So taking the internet back, I love that you're grounding people back in their reasoning center and in their body, and making those things aligned so that they can get a clearer view of reality, because we're like absolutely stuck in toxic loops of reactivity because of social media. But like, hey, I
You
would
said
say
it.
like, yeah,
Ding, ding, ding. You hit the head. Toxic.
yeah,
Toxic. Like,
yeah,
it is TikTok is the worst one
yeah,
ever.
yeah,
And Jay had mentioned this in an interview too. He's like, it's so toxic because these people come together, and then they find the like-minded people, and they sponge together, and then
yep,
it's like one big wall of just negativity. And it's like, I like TikTok, don't get me wrong. There's great people I've met on there,
yeah,
but I just like, I have to do it in small doses, because some of these people, they just start drama. It's like, oh, well, and then it starts feeling like a cult a little bit for some of these groups of people. And it's like, yeah, this kind of feels like we're about to drink the Kool-Aid together, but I'm not drinking
yep.
that Kool-Aid. I don't know what you put in that punch, you know, I'm sorry.
No, I know. And I always tell people that too, because they're like, how dare you call this a cult? And I'm like, it's not about whether something is a cult or not has nothing to do with what's being endorsed or ascribed to or believed. It has to do with the suspension of critical thought. If you can no longer question something or criticize it because you are a part of it, you have cult mentality, period. Like, that's it.
Exactly. That's
all.
my point too, is that the cult-like mentality they have, and it's like, you need to stop. It's kind of creeping me out a little bit, because like one of them, it was like they invite us to this group, and then, oh, we're going to invite you to this Snapchat message. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll follow this thing. I'm kind of curious where this is going to go. Like, okay, let's go venture. You know? And it's like, you go into this thing, and it's like, okay, this is really feeling like I'm texting somebody on the side. I'm like, yeah, this kind of feels like a cult, dude. I'm out, bro. I can't do this. This is just like making me feel ick, you know?
Yeah.
Like, ugh, I don't want to be a part of whatever this is. It's not doesn't feel right. And I feel like that's the scary part too when you bring people together. It's like, sometimes you'll get that, but nobody wants to police it. Like, Facebook. Oh, I can't control what people are posting. You can. It's your damn site. What do you mean? It's your job to
Exactly.
police these things are being said. You can't let these people say these crazy ass things and go, oh, well, I can't police it. It's not my job. Well, then whose job is it? Because if not, it's yours. It's your site, correct? Yes. Okay. So then take responsibility for your own actions. And I think like that's a lot of times what it is. People don't want to. They want to go, well, it's not my fault this happened. I don't know what to tell you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Elizabeth, let's get to the fun part of the show. We're at the part of the show where I asked 2 questions, okay?
Okay.
I ask every guest on the show this question after I met my good friend Gretchen from the podcast called The Shit That Goes On in Her Head, okay? So when we met,
Okay.
I know that's a great one. I said, God damn it, I'm
Taking
glad you
notes.
took that away from me. You know what? I love it. She's great, though. If you reach out to her, 100% mention my name. She'd definitely get you on.
Okay.
She and I had a conversation. So her question to me and my question to you is, Elizabeth, if your mental health had a song, what would that song be?
It would be the song by Pink, Never Gonna Not Dance Again.
See, I like Pink, though. My ex-wife was big into Pink, and I'm like, at first I was kind of like, all right, I've heard it. So I really like her songs. A lot of her songs she plays, I'm like, man, I want to hate it because it's not the type of music I normally listen to, but what she's writing is so real, though. Think about it. Like, what
Yeah.
she's saying is like it's so real, and I'm a big music guy. I love music, but that is a fantastic answer. Pink is actually the first time it's been mentioned into it. And the time that I've been doing this, I've got like Rage Against the Machine, which really was my favorite one because I'm a big Rage Against the Machine fan.
Yeah.
That one came from Susan Snow, the author of The Other Side of the Gun. She was like, you're going to make fun of me if I say it. I'm like, why? She's like, I like Rage Against the Machine. I'm like, what? Rage Against the Machine? I almost jumped out of the chair, was jumping. I was like, what? It's like, that's awesome. But it's always a fun question because you think about it, like when you ask me other people, are like, damn, that's a really good question. I said, and you're like, well, and then they really start thinking, well, what if it's not one song? I'm like, break it down however you feel like it. Like for me, some days it changes. Like
Yeah.
I've been lately been getting like the intro to this podcast is It Me by a band called Let Me Bleed, and I've been following them since TikTok.
Yeah.
And like I said, TikTok's good for those certain things. Like I've met a lot of different people, and it just depends. A lot of the songs apply to a lot of stuff I do, and the music is a massive thing to me. Like Stained is when I'm depressed, Stained is usually when it's in my playlist. Or Cold, or, a lot of these other bands that similar to that, when I'm in a kind of my anxiety's at a all-time high, it's punk rock. It could be anything from NoFX, Anti-Flag, Less Than Jake, Smoker Fire, anything like that. To Rise Against is actually one of my favorite ones of all time, and things like that too. But when I get musicians on here, I always ask them, listen, hey, what album have you listened to front to back without any stopping, just to see what they're listening to, because it's so interesting to hear their perspective on things. And we've had a few musicians on the show. One actually had BPD. She's actually a woman by the name of Lucy Lenore. She's actually a tattooer down in Houston.
Yeah.
But she has a band called Haunter. And this woman has like 500,000 downloads and things like that too. You would think she'd come in with some kind of ego. Lucy probably was the coolest person I've met so far, next to you and a few other people on this show, that just like have no ego whatsoever. They could be the most popular person in the world, but she didn't make you feel small at all.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucy was so cool when she started talking about it, because I didn't realize how big of a mental health advocate she was, and it was so great to explore. And she was my early interview. She was like the 14th interview I got. I was like, when she said yes, I was running around the house like screaming and yelling, like, what happened? I just got a person with 20,000 followers on Instagram to say yes to come on the show.
Yeah.
And then it came to, I got one of my top 5, which is Dr. Jen Bellinger came on. And I'm not gonna lie, fangirled the whole time. Like, it was great. It was so cool because she was so cool, Elizabeth. She was so awesome. Just like,
That's awesome.
when you said yes to come on the show, I was like, hell yeah, let's go. And then I started reading about you, and I was like, holy crap, wow, this is gonna be an interesting conversation. And when you read your resume, a lot of people probably go, well, okay, this is gonna be a tough conversation. And it's not. It's so great because the way you apply things to people, you make it so easy to understand. Even if I didn't understand any of those things prior to this conversation, you just made it so easy to process. So I'd love to invite you to my community before we get to the last question.
Yeah.
I am definitely going to shoot an invite over to your email address so you can join us. And then if you have anything, if you want to like have a feed on there where you want to post stuff about, your theories about evolution or anything you're working on, like I'll give you a whole feed. I'm really literally to give you a whole feed just to put things out so I can go back and watch it all.
I would love that. Thank you.
So, Elizabeth, let's get to the question, the most important question, and the reason this podcast exists. If, in your own opinion, if you could break the stigma about mental health, anything that you see like on the internet that you just don't agree with, that people need to stop believing, what would you say that would be?
I would say that we need to tell the truth, that most of what looks like disorder or mental illness is actually a completely normal response to an insane social environment. And instead of pathologizing individuals for reacting the way a normal person should in an insane environment, we need to look at the system and acknowledge where it's toxic and dysfunctional, dismantle those parts, and rebuild it from scratch. And that's what my mission is really at the end of the day.
Tell them in the back, Elizabeth. I don't think they can hear you back there. You know what I mean? But I love it. All right.
Yeah.
And with that being said, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. We're going to wrap up this episode of Pete for Society. Before we sign off, Elizabeth, do you want to let everybody know where they can find you? What's the best place for them to reach out to you and follow your work?
Yeah, I have a website called quantumreconciliation.com, and people can reach out to me there. I have an appointment or link to schedule just consultations, conversations for free if people want to talk. I have my email address on there, and then my essays and my work is posted on Medium, and I'm also on Threads. I'm pretty active on there.
Oh, heck yeah, definitely. Well, once again, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming. I absolutely loved it. I would definitely get you that link to the school community. Guys, come on, check out the school community with Elizabeth. Elizabeth's going to be there. Everybody else is there. We're slowly growing, but we're getting there. And things like that too. Let's take back the internet, as I like to say. Yeah. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety on X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to Pandora Radio. And as I always say, it costs nothing to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety signing off saying, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health today?